So who should be involved in setting objectives?
So I put this into a couple of different stages. So the first stage is where we look for feedback and consultation from basically all members of the team. The way I do this, or the reason I do this, is because you never know where a good idea is going to come from. So members of the team are often at the coalface. They might be senior managers. They could be even directors and owners. The key thing here is to draw out the objectives that are going to be relevant for the company that we can then start to work our way through and try and make a bit of a short list. That to me is where stage 2 comes in. We look at the list that we have generated and we start to review what is going to be our key objectives for this particular period of time, keeping in mind capability and capacity. Once we have defined those particular objectives that we're going to look at, we then go back to the key stakeholders for those particular objectives. And with those key stakeholders, we then nut it out a bit for, which gives us that sort of buy-in or ownership of the people that are going to be stakeholders in those objectives, and then obviously get their sign-off and approval on it. And that's what we would do to ensure that we've got everyone who we need to involved in the setting of that objective.
I have these conversations regularly with some of our clients. I believe quite far out objectives, so like 5-year, 10-year objectives, should be very much set at a strategic high level. However, it's important that these objectives take a pyramid effect and that they are driven down through the organisation, and the organisation therefore has to involve the layers of management, supervisors, and even down into the objectives and goals that might be set on a yearly appraisal for individuals. So yes, they are set at a strategic high level, but there must be a pyramid effect that the involvement has to be with effectively almost everyone in the organisation.
Well, this is a problematic question in many regards. So ideally, the process of setting objectives for your management system should be led by top management, and where appropriate, involve a wider group of people. So that's the ideal version. In a lot of cases, it's left up to the HSCQ manager or the quality manager to actually drive that process. And that in itself tends to contribute to objectives, accountabilities and plans being less effective than they could be. So my advice is to try and get the top management involved in leading that process. And most importantly, you've got to involve stakeholders from the business who are actually impacted by a particular objective in contributing to the plans and accountabilities around that. So for example, if there's an objective of improving the efficiency of a particular manufacturing process, then it's a good idea to involve the key stakeholders from that part of the business. This helps ensure that the objective's relevant and importantly gets the buy-in of the workers that are likely to be most impacted by the objective and the plans to achieve it.
I'm the Mango partner for Africa, so I'm going to be asking from an African perspective because we wrestle around this question often. I deal a lot with ISO 45000, which is very strong on the emphasis of consultation and participation. And obviously one of the requirements of the standard is that workers, they are consulted in policy and objectives. Now, one of the big questions that arises regularly is what type of value would a lower level or blue collar worker be able to render in organizational strategic objectives? In answering the question, I might look at the objectives that either strategic or departmental or individual. I think it's great from a culture perspective and eliciting trust and getting people engaged where you do have workers or their representatives involved in the setting of strategic objectives. I think there is a question that regularly arises when I deal with senior management over the value that workers or their representatives would be able to render in setting strategic objectives, because they can be very complex and based on a lot of complex information. However, the setting of departmental or individual objectives, it's absolutely key that workers and their representatives are involved in the identification and setting of those objectives.
My thing is that wherever it should be at the employee level. Employees or workers can be at different levels. So your departmental one, yes, but I think is the role of the management is to guide them, not to tell them how to do it, and to provide them information.
All right, so Obviously, to me, senior management would be the main group that should be involved. The objective is an objective for the business or the organisation. So, if they're not involved, it's not going to be an effective standard at all. Over and above that, of course, you'll want the subject matter experts like the QHSE person, even people like human resources, those sorts of people should be involved in setting these objectives. And when you're really getting to that high level and your company is really working well, you can start to involve your workers as well. It's not something that I find is routinely done. The workers get told what the objectives are sometimes, but if it's working excellently, then why not ask your workers, what do you think we should be trying to strive for in safety? What should our quality objectives be? Those sorts of things. So across the board is ideal, but minimum senior management.
If we take an example, we want to reduce, or we decide to reduce energy usage by 5% across 3 years across our different sites. So we're going to have to, in that kind of decision making, we're going to need to involve senior management. It's also important we have their authorisation and support for that objective. The energy savings are actually going to be out in the operational areas, and that's why we need support from the top to make sure that can be effectively rolled out across those operational areas. It's also really important to consult with, gain the support of sites, site managers, department managers, supervisors and other personnel who will actually be involved in undertaking the actions to support your objectives.
To all the partners who contributed today, thank you, and hopefully the audience is going to learn some new techniques, your observations, and maybe they can get some value from it and maybe change the way they're doing it. So thank you.